Scott and Jenna are a young couple. Scott befriends Mike. But Mike is obsessed with Scott's wife. Hey guys, welcome back to the movie summary. Beginning of the movie, we see Mike. He is working as a freelancer at home. Mike's wife works as a teacher. One day he looks out of the window and sees a couple. Their names are Jenna and Scott. They both came to stay at Mike's next house. Mike walks up to Scott and greets him. Scott has a sports car. Mike likes that car a lot. Scott tells him that I will help in buying such a car. Scott is working as a car salesman. Jenna also meets Mike. Mike invites them over for a Sunday barbecue at his house. Night, Mike's wife Lisa comes home. Mike tells her about the new neighbors. He says, I invited them to barbecue. Then Lisa says, you should tell me before you invite them. Because I invited only friends to barbecue. For the past few days, small quarrels are going on between the two. Lisa has a lot of stress due to her job. Now we look at Sunday. Scott and Jenna also came to barbecue. Scott talks about selling a car to Mike's friend. Jenna approaches Mike while he's barbecuing. Mike asks, how long have you been married to her? Jenna says it's been 4 months, but we've been dating for years. Mike's garden is very beautiful. Jenna, I want to set up a garden like this in my house too. Will you help me? Mike says, I will definitely help. Here Scott doesn't care much for Jenna. He yells at her. Mike doesn't like watching all this. At night, Mike and Lisa talk about Jenna and Scott. Lisa says Scott is very funny. To which Mike says he is not funny but very different. Mike doesn't like Scott. Night, Mike looks out the window as he works. Next door, Mike and Jenna get intimate. Then Mike goes to bed with his wife. He wants to spend private time with Lisa. But Lisa says, I have work tomorrow, and goes to bed. Next day, Jenna is in her garden. Mike also comes there. She doesn't understand how to garden here. To that, Mike says, I will help you, don't get tense. Scott wants to have children. But Jenna wants to build her career first. She tells Mike that even after she is set in her career, it will be difficult to take care of the children. For that, Mike says, you can work at home like me. Then you can manage your career and family too. Night, Mike and Lisa are having dinner. Lisa tells Mike what happened today. Also says that I am very frustrated today. Hearing all this, Mike ignores her. He keeps thinking about Jenna. Lisa asks him, what are you thinking? Mike says nothing. Later, he looks out the window as he works. Jenna and Scott have a big fight outside. Jenna leaves after a while. Mike thinks Scott may have hit her. So he gets disturbed. The next day, Mike is approached by his friend Brian. Mike tells him about Jenna and Scott. Brian says, Scott is a very strange man. He tried hard to sell me the car. While they are talking, Jenna comes to work in the garden. Brian tells that Jenna is so cute. You should try to get close to her. Mike says him that, I have never seen Jenna that way. But he was thinking about her a lot. That night, Mike asks Lisa, do you remember our honeymoon? Then Lisa remembers their romantic days. Later, they both become intimate. He imagines Jenna and becomes intimate with Lisa. Next day, Mike looks out the window. Just then, Scott comes to Jenna. Then a fight takes place between the two of them. That night, he could not focus on his work. Mike's son Alex is coming home to stay for a few days. Alex likes Scott's car. Next day, Mike goes out to buy groceries. Then he sees Jenna. He tries to talk to her. But because Jenna is late for yoga class, she leaves early. Later, Mike is drinking with his friend at the bar. Brian asks Scott about Jenna. Mike says that there is a lot of fighting between them. Then Brian says it is their family matter. You shouldn't go in between them. After that, Mike goes home. At home, Scott, Lisa and Alex are talking together. Then Scott invites everyone for dinner. Lisa says she can't come as she is busy. But she says she will send Alex. Alex became a good friend to Scott and Jenna. He often spends time with them. Mike doesn't like watching all this. So he tells Lisa that Scott is not good and don't send Alex to them. Then Lisa says Alex grew up. It's not right for you to control him. Mike wants to talk to Jenna. So he is always looking out of the window for her. One day, Jenna went out to throw the garbage in the trash can. Seeing this, Mike also goes near her to throw the garbage. He says, I saw you two fighting with Scott. Jenna says nothing has like that. Scott sometimes drinks too much, so he screams loudly. Also says you don't think too much about it. Just then, Scott yells at Jenna and calls her to hurry inside the house. One day, Mike and Jenna go to get plants for their gardens. Then Mike tells what he used to do when he was young. He says, I smoke. Jenna says that I also smoke occasionally. Later, they both smoke at Jenna's house. Then Jenna tells the facts about Scott. Scott has a lot of anger. At first it was less, but now it is much more. Scott wants kids. But I am confused. She says I did wrong by marrying Scott. Then Mike says if you are so confused then don't have kids. She thinks Mike understands her. Then she gives him a hug. Also kisses. That night Lisa tells Mike that she wants to go to yoga classes with Jenna too. Hearing this, Mike will be disappointed. Because he doesn't like Lisa and Jenna going to yoga classes together. Lisa asks Mike that Jenna young and beautiful, if you like her. Mike says there is no such thing. One day Jenna and Mike are fighting and Mike hears their screams. Mike immediately goes into their house. Scott stays at home. Scott sees Mike and said, "What are you doing here?" Mike says that he came here because he heard the sound of some things breaking. For that, Scott, everything is normal here. Better you go home. Then Mike asks if Scott is normal with Jenna. This makes Scott even more angry. She tells him that everything is normal. A flower vase fell down, that's why the sound was come. Mike is not leaving. Scott then asks Mike, "Why aren't you leaving here?" Also asks, "Do you like my wife? Why did you look out the window when my wife was by the swimming pool?" Then Mike says you are a rubbish man and leaves. He goes into the house with a lot of frustration. Lisa asks what happened to Mike. Mike tells him everything that happened. Then Lisa, "You should not go near them like this. There is a risk of something happening to you too." She says you should call the police. Then Mike speaks angrily. Then Lisa realizes that Mike has feelings for Jenna. She says you are behaving strangely from last few days and says leave the house. Next day he wants to talk to Jenna one last time as he is leaving home. So he goes to her house. He asks, "How are you with Jenna?" She replied, "Everything is normal. But I won't stay with Scott. I talked to my ex-boyfriend. His house is empty. I will stay there now." Then Mike says, "I am also leaving home." Jenna then realizes that it is because of her that Mike has to leave the house. He says, "I am taking a nice apartment on rent. You can come with me if you want." Jenna doesn't like his proposal. She clarifies him that, "I kissed you because I felt so lonely that day. I don't have any feelings for you." Then Mike leaves from there. He called Alex and says, "There were some misunderstandings between me and Lisa. I will be out for a few days." Alex says, "Mom will divorce you soon." One day Brian comes to meet Mike. Brian asks Mike if anything happened between you and Jenna. Mike says there is no such thing. She has gone to another city. Then Brian says, "I saw Jenna today, she is still with Scott." Hearing this, Mike will be very disappointed. Next day he goes to see Jenna. Mike asks her, "Didn't you leave from here yet?" Jenna says, "I am pregnant now. Now I want to have this baby. From few days me and Scott are going to counseling. It says that we are removing all the misunderstandings between us." For that Mike says, "Great, you must be good." Now Mike realizes his mistake. He goes to Lisa and says sorry. Then Lisa doesn't listen to him. Then he comes out. Jenna is smoking outside. Mike tells Jenna that smoking is not good for the unborn child. Just then, Scott comes near Jenna and drags her, shouting at her. Seeing that, Mike gets angry and beats him. Scott also beats Mike and takes Jenna home. Mike also goes into the house and fights with Scott. Scott beats Mike well. Then Mike takes the golf stick and hits Scott on the head. So Scott is bleeding. Jenna then scolds Mike, "Why did you do this?" and asks him to leave the house. Immediately she calls an ambulance. But Scott was already dead. This is how this movie ends. 99% people watch my videos without subscribing. I am working hard to make these videos. My humble request to subscribe my channel to grow.